Greetings. Hi. Welcome back to the strategy session. I'm Stuart Stevens, and this is a very, very special show. We have with us Senator Doug Jones from Alabama, who made history, and we're going to talk about that. And I've been a fan of his for an embarrassing long time, way before he ran for the U.S. Senate. We have Joe Trippi, uh, as we say, build that
Oh
race.
no.
And we have, from an undisclosed location, Rick Wilson. Uh, this could involve some rendition. We're not sure, but we're going to have Rick as long as
It's
we
it's
can.
it's it's not Gitmo, I promise.
Um, well, those of us that have spent half our life in Atlanta Airport might opt for Gitmo.
Uh,
Um,
Looks familiar.
so, so look, I've got us. We got a lot to talk about. You know, President of the United States going to jail, little things like that. No labels, but I just have to take a moment of personal privilege as a fanboy, and have Senator, you tell the sort of how lay the predicate of your amazing historic run in the Senate, if you
Stuart, I
could.
couldn't hear anything because before Rick made
Okay, I'll start over. I was just, yeah, Rick needed to be. I was just
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege here before we start talking about, little things like the President of the United States going to jail and, labels and all of that. I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that incredible race of yours, the special election where you did what I bet when you launched, how many people thought you would win? I mean, probably not
yeah,
all your family
not as
members,
many
probably
people as
half.
on this show. Okay,
I was going to say, tell me about how did you decide to enter that race? Did you know that you were going to run as soon as there was a vacancy?
I really didn't because initially the specialist session election was set for way out. It was set for the general election in 2018,
Right.
and the governor appointed set it way out. And I'm thinking I'm not going to run with everybody else. I was thinking about running for something, but I thought during the main thing, McConnell would put in a ton of money. It wouldn't be an opportunity. Our governor had to quit office, had to leave under bad circumstances, and the lieutenant governor, who's now our governor, reset it and moved it up, and that made it, you're going to be the only game in town, the only opportunity. And so when I talked to a couple of my buddies, the late Giles Perkins, Doug Turner, they got Joe Trippi down. We talked and we saw a path. I mean, it was a narrow path, but we saw a path in a special election. And, my wife and I just sat down. We decided, we've been talking a good game for a long time about good people running for office. Now it's time
Hmm.
to, now it's time to do it. People in the state needed a voice that they hadn't had in a long time. And we were able to do
It was like history
Yeah.
called your bluff, huh?
that.
Um,
A good way to
Yeah.
put
I
it.
mean,
and,
Stuart, when
and,
I was
and,
down there,
and Joe,
the
when you
first,
were on that plane going down to Alabama, were you thinking, well, this will be interesting. I'll get to work with a great guy, but there's not a chance in hell we're going to win this thing? Or did you see a path yourself?
well, I knew Giles and I had talked to him a bit, and he had just said, "There's a guy down here. He can do this. No one else could do it, but he can. And I need you to come down and have dinner with us and help talk him into it." And I got to tell you, what I mean, it was a fantastic dinner, and I was really impressed and everything. But I walked when I got back on the plane. I really didn't think Doug was going to run. I mean, he clearly wanted to. I thought Louise was not quite. His wife was not quite there, and I really thought, man, we could win this thing. I hope he goes, but I really didn't think he would. And then about 2 or 3 days later, Giles called me up and said, "Get your butt back down here," and and it was a sprint the whole way. But it
Yeah.
was it
So,
was the best thing I've done in politics, uh, was being part of
and
that
And
campaign.
Rick, you were watching that, and having done a lot of races in the South.
Outside, yeah,
Um,
we had some. Go ahead, Stuart.
no, I was going to say, what was your take on it going in? Did you see a path that a Democrat could actually
Well,
get elected statewide?
look, I knew that they would have to thread the needle extraordinarily closely with white suburban women, African Americans, and really cherry pick a mosaic in that race. And we had some outside money in the race, and we worked suburban women, but the campaign itself really was. I thought it set a new model, and in some ways, when you look back at it now, Roy Moore was a preview of what we're facing today.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
stubborn MAGA candidate and his
Yep.
base that will pick the wrong person every single time they're given the chance.
Right.
So it was. I think the race, and Doug ran a damn near perfect campaign in every respect, but it certainly made an impression on me as something that was a preview of things to come in terms of the MAGA primaries and Trump's influence over those candidates.
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
I've often compared that race to the equivalent of winning the World Series with four perfect games. You had to do everything right at every moment. And, you know, for those of you that may not be familiar with the senator's background, he has this extraordinary background. You should read his book, Bending Arc of History. Is it? That's the title.
Bending toward justice.
Bending Toward Justice. I was just rereading it last night. I read it when it came out. Um, it's really a beautiful book about, in part memoir, part telling the story of the extraordinary route that he was able to bring those responsible for the tragic bombing of Sunday school in Birmingham, which we're coming up on the 60th
Yeah.
anniversary of it. Is that right? In
60
September?
years in September.
Yeah. Um, and U.S. attorney, and then getting elected in that special election. Um, and I just have to ask, when you guys looked at that race, I'm sure you polled the senator's background. And how many people were familiar with his history, uh, bringing those to justice? Was it widely known? Did you have to?
it it was an age thing,
Mm-hmm.
Stuart. I mean, people over 45, 50 years, the older you got, they knew it. I mean, they understood it, and they understood the importance of Doug prosecuting those Klansmen and bring them to justice. I mean, decades after the crime. I mean, the terror, the horror of it all, and those four little girls. But as you got younger, there wasn't a lot of knowledge, actually there was also a little bit of, hey, that was a long time in the past. What about now? And that was something that the senator kept insisting on all the way through was, hey, I've got a history, but I want to talk about the kitchen table issues that
Right,
people are really worried about.
right.
And you're right, Rick, about having to thread the needle, because we won, we won that thing real late. With the last votes come in, and I think it was like 21, 20. Senator probably knows it to the vote, but it was around 23,000
Yeah,
votes that we,
that's
we
about
we
right.
pulled that thing out with. But the other thing, though, and I think the senator deserves a lot of credit for that, the campaign, is that I think it really woke up the entire party, gave it a lot of inspiration to go into 2018, and actually laid out a little bit of the roadmap for going after those suburban women. I mean, some of the things we now all know after 2018, 2020 about what the pieces of the puzzle are to put a winning coalition together in places that are easier than Alabama. But I think the first glimpses of it did happen in that campaign with what the senator's message was and how Doug carried himself throughout the campaign.
Yeah, Stuart, I think part of that was just being, I told Joe early on, told everybody, and Louise and I just, we were going to be authentic. I was going to be who I was. I was
Right.
not going to be
Mm.
somebody that I wasn't. I wasn't going to be some made up candidate. I was going to be who I was and give that kind of voice. And that's, I think, what we've needed in the South more and more. We've seen too many old school. Yeah, you're from Mississippi. You've seen this, where Democrats try to run this old school thing where you try to get votes that you're never going to get. instead of trying to excite a base of voters that are out there for you. And, it was
Yeah.
easy for us with the church bombing. I got introduced a bunch of times for a friend of mine who said, this is the guy who's the most famous lawyer who you don't know his name.
Hmm.
And so it's real easy to connect the dots for people and let us talk about those kitchen table issues and just hammer on them and let other people talk about my opponent.
Well, I mean, it's hard to think of a starker contrast of old Alabama versus new Alabama
Yeah.
than you and Roy Moore. And the best races are about differences and big differences. Um, Senator, we were talking the other day, and you were drawing parallels between the importance of what's going on now in the rule of law and those that said that you should just let this terrible thing that happens in the past and move on. And I'd love if you would just talk about that some, because you
Well,
really have a unique perspective on that.
look, I just yesterday gave a speech about the church bombing cases, or on Sunday I did that, and I think we're so backsliding on so many areas of civil rights, human rights, and social justice that we got to remind people of those things we got to remind people of what Jim Crow was. We've got to remind people of that kind of almost apartheid like atmosphere, and more importantly, I think just and not just the basic lack of civil rights, but how public officials use their platforms with these
Mhm.
dog whistle politics to incite riots, to incite violence. I mean, it happened all the time in the South, and we're seeing more and more of that. And that's why we can't let this MAGA right. We can't let these extremists tell us that we can't talk about history. Those are our histories, and it's not good in a lot of ways. But if we don't teach those, we don't learn from those, and we've got to learn
You
from
know,
civics. And we're
you
having
know,
real problems these days.
Doug. I interviewed Kevin Cruz, the historian, today, and we were talking about this history of the South and about how this generational shift has led a lot of Republicans try to rewrite or erase the history of what happened during Jim Crow and what happened during the '60s as the civil rights fight became a very hot issue in the country. Is that one of the things we're just losing the battle on? Is that the generations have shifted, and it's a very few people today were alive to see Dr. King. Very few people today were alive to understand what the Voting Rights Act meant to the country.
Yeah. No,
It just seems to me that that's a gap we're having now.
yeah, I do think we've lost a lot of that. I don't. It's hard to teach all of that though, and for people to understand what we had and what we how far we've actually come. And it's real easy now. So much is done for political power, and to try to gain a political advantage using race, using religion. But that's been the case for many, many years. We've just got to go back, I think, and let these young folks look. And there are folks out there that are doing it. I think there's a generational problem of just the lack of education that we ought to be able to remind people of. If we just do that, it's really easy, because the one thing about this generation, they've grown up in a different era, and they
Mhm.
believe in equal rights. They've got gay friends, they've got friends of other races, and so it's really easy to pull them into this thing. They've just got to know and understand what's going on, I think, and we have lost that a good bit. And it's getting even worse when people are going to these school board meetings and all, and trying to literally rewrite textbooks. That's the thing. Just at a time when we are trying to move away from the lost cause of the Confederacy, they're trying to put it back.
Right, right. I think it's very. It's a really worrying inflection point in our culture right now.
And when you look at the stakes in this election, um, how do you really see what's on the ballot, Senator, in this 24 election?
Democracy. I mean, y'all talk about it all the time, guys. You guys are probably the most vocal folks out there talking about this. This is the future of our country. This is democracy. Look at that New York Times. For the people watching this that didn't see the New York
I
Times article in the last day or so about the plans that Donald Trump has to take over the federal government, to literally move independent people out of the government and take it over lock, stock, and barrel. It is, as someone said, a presidential dictatorship. And that is frightening to me. That is absolutely frightening. And what troubles me the most is that people are more concerned about Joe Biden's damn age than they are about Donald Trump trying to destroy democracy. And I think this election over the next few months, I think in talking about what he's done, but we have got to talk about this. We've got to talk, and we've got to get more Republicans talking about this, guys. I was watching Chris Christie. Everybody says Chris Christie's going to be the hatchet man. He's the one that's going to go right through Donald Trump. He was on every talk show in the books on Sunday. Did not once mention democracy. Did not once mention the threats to democracy that he did. He just talked about him losing and not building a wall and not and increasing the deficit. Well, he damn came close to destroying this country, and that's
Yeah.
what they need to be talking about.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, that the litmus test for a Republican should be, will you support Donald Trump if he's a nominee? You can really call yourself an American, because he is the most fundamentally anti-American and the America that we love candidate um, of a major party.
Right.
Others see the danger of a third party candidacy at this
Mhm.
time. Um, I mean, Joe, you ran one of the great presidential campaigns ever. You didn't win with Dean, but you really rewrote how it was to run for president. Um, Talk a little bit about what you see as sort of the danger here of no labels, and why Democrats should be absolutely down.
It not just Dem, everybody. We've all talked about this, and that's what kind of, if you look at this. Um, I'm assuming no labels. Let's put the best blush on no labels that it's a moderate, centrist, pro democracy ticket that they're going to put up. Well, that's only going to split the moderate, centrist, pro democracy vote. We're running, it's Trump versus democracy, and if what their intention, what they say their intention is truly their intention, Trump wins. And you don't need polls to tell you this. We all know, everybody every day on every pundit out there talks about how in the Republican primary in 2016 and in this Republican primary, the fact that there are, if you get, in fact, if you're no labels and they want to give choice, the more he benefits from that. So it's not even about their motives. It's just we are in this literally razor's edge, trying to hold on to them, and whether it's likely that we can succeed or that they'll get the message eventually.
I'm hoping they're going to get the message, Joe. I'm going to continue to be a little bit optimistic about that. And in fact, Stuart and I were having a conversation offline yesterday, and I just get the sense that there are some people that are giving half-hearted arguments about this right now, including the guy I was on TV with the other day. So I'm hopeful that they're going to see this, because when I was on TV Sunday with Joe Lieberman said he was hoping that the two parties would get the message from the polling that people want someone different. Well, the message that no labels get from their own polling and things that you guys have done is that Biden has votes taken away from him if a third party runs, and it puts Donald Trump in the White House, assuming that Donald Trump is on no labels. And by the way, I want to be one of the first to say, I think that no labels and what they've done in Congress has done some really good work over the years. And
Mhm.
that's what they were founded to do. To be no labels. We want to talk to you not as Republicans and Democrats. We want to talk to you as Americans. And let's kind of find common ground. And they helped pass the infrastructure bill. They did some good things. But let me tell you, if they start running a candidate against the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee, they're done. There's no
Yep.
way there's no way on God's green earth they cannot get 270 electoral votes. There's just no way that can happen in the way that our elections are set up. And so be a spoiler probably for somebody one way or another. And it's clear it would be a spoiler for Donald Trump. And then their effectiveness. They may as well close the shop because nobody in Congress is going to talk to them ever again. And Joe or Huntsman or whoever who's built a pretty good legacy as public servants are now going to have an asterisk with that legacy is just going to be an asterisk. And they're going to be put over in the category with George Wallace and Strom Thurmond and Ralph
Yep.
Nader and others. And
Jill Stein.
I am
Yeah.
hoping that they see that they're not giving people choices. Think about this, guys. They said they're giving people choices. There's a boatload of choices in the Republican Party. I mean,
Sure.
it's not like it's just Donald Trump. And the reason there's not as many choices in the Democratic Party is because the people are supporting Joe Biden. He is that centrist candidate. Okay. He is the person who's bought the infrastructure bill. You can get me kind of wound up on stuff like this because I've
Mhm.
seen it happen too many times. And I just hope that they will come to their senses now because they're not going to be able to do it next spring. They're not going to be able to shut things down.
No.
The damage will have been done if they don't
Well,
go ahead and shut it down now.
Mhm.
Rick, you can speak to having been involved in presidential campaigns, how they take a life of their own, and no
That,
campaign
that
ever ends because it just wants to end. It ends because it
right.
has to end, which usually means running out of money or something like this. I mean, next spring,
But
this race will be tight because it's going to be tight all the way. I mean,
Yep.
to me, it just seems incredibly naive to think that somebody like Joe Lieberman, even if he wanted to, could shut this down.
Well,
No,
I mean, as you're right, Stuart, about how campaigns take on a life of their own. And before you're the nominee, the party still has a lot of influence in the process. But after the nominee is named, the party has relatively little influence over
Yep.
the system. Nancy Jacobson is not going to be able to call Joe Manchin up one day and say, "Hey, you're the nominee of the party now. Do this, this, and this because now we know Trump's going to win." She will not have that control over whoever the candidate is. And as Doug correctly pointed out, even their own polling tells us that that they pull votes away from the pro democracy side, away from Joe Biden, and toward Trump. Their own polling says it. Their own people have admitted it on television. This is a game of Russian roulette with our democracy, and I think it is enormously risky and enormously dangerous for this country. And we've been very out front, maybe out front. There are a lot of groups in the coalition, but Lincoln is Lincoln, and we've taken a pretty stern approach to this because you know we have one weird sick gift. Doug, I don't know if you've ever heard this joke about the Lincoln Project, but we are sick of being right. We are like the Cassandras of American politics. When we tell people something's going to happen, 99.99% of the time it's how it turns out. Um, and and so I don't want to be the Cassandra next spring. I want them to understand it sooner than later, and I want Nancy to stop pretending that this is some merely do-gooder exercise because there's a lot of history there, which we could talk about at much greater length. But guys, as for me, I need to go get on this airplane. They're about
All right, brother.
to summon me.
hey,
But thank you, everybody. Thanks, Doug, for coming on. Guys,
thanks,
I
Rick.
will see you all tomorrow, and we'll go from there. Thanks, folks.
All right, Rick. Travel
take care.
safe. What this question that you hit on, Senator, of their legacy, because the odds that a independent is going to be elected president of the United States is non-existent. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen. I mean, all of us have one thing in common with Ross Perot, who did run as a populist, and that is we have never collectively we've never won an electoral college vote, and neither did Joe, neither did Perot, and he's the guy that got 19%, and they hold him out as an example. Um, and what is that? That's all you're going to be remembered for
Yeah.
when you what Trump
Unless
is going to do to the country.
Yeah, unless you do get a few electoral college votes. If Manchin could win, for instance, West Virginia, which I'm not sure. I think he's got a better chance of winning West Virginia in the Senate than he does
Hmm.
beating Donald Trump in West Virginia. But, then, the last third party candidate to get electoral votes was George Wallace, an
Right.
arch segregationist. And so that's where you get when you go there. It's just not
But,
feasible. And what really is troubling me as much as anything these days, Stuart, is that number one, they don't tell us who's funding the efforts, who is putting up the
Yeah.
money to put people on the ballot in 50 states. And they say, well, we're just following the law. Well, there's one thing about following the law, and there's another about transparency and who is the motive. And it's going to be the same mega donors, whoever they may be, who's actually going to select the nominee. It's not going to be millions of voters in a primary system like is going to happen in the Republican primary or even in the Democratic primary this time, even though the president is running again. It's going to be a handful of people who are going to anoint somebody, and it's going to be some kind of coronation in April if they have a convention. So that's not choice. That's not
Right.
democracy. That is not a choice at all. This thing about we want to give people a choice. They're saying we don't trust the American people. We don't trust voters in either party, and so
That's a great point.
we know better than you do. We know better than you do, and we're going to select an alternative for you. And they foolishly believe that people will buy into it. What is troubling is that enough people are concerned about the candidates that they will flip an election. We're not talking about flipping an election by 10 or 15 points. You only need a couple of percentage points. Um,
Right.
you know, Ralph Nader got 100,000 votes in Florida, and Al Gore lost by 500, okay, or thereabouts. So that's the danger here. That is the absolute danger. And the proof is this. The proof to me is simply this. Most every Democrat I know is saying this is insane. This
Hmm.
is just nuts. But yet, what is Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and those guys saying? Oh, I
Right.
think they have a point.
Yeah.
I think they should have this choice. I mean, come on, people. Just think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. I mean, think about, go back to Iowa, Joe, when you were running Dean's campaign and that person to person sort of campaign. You,
Yeah.
you're not going to have anything like that picking. How are they going to pick the
No, they're
nominee?
going to have. It's going to be a. It's probably going to be picked by a handful of people in a mansion in Georgetown, inside the Beltway. I mean, this is that's who's that's who this really is, and But to get down to how crazy this is, again, I think is in their map of how they get to 270. They say that they will win Delaware, Vermont, Massachusetts. I mean, it is a bunch of crazy places that just there's no Delaware. Yeah, I think they forgot where the incumbent president hails from. I mean, it makes no sense. And even forget their map. You don't have to be a political pro to say to yourself, which party is going to win Mississippi and Alabama's
Right.
electoral votes, no matter who the nominee is. It's the same thing,
Right.
California or New York, who are going to win those electoral votes. So yeah, it's true. It's possible that you can win two or three. I mean, West Virginia, if it was Manchin, I mean, you can win, but if all you're really going to do is make it so either there's only two possible scenarios here in Georgia or Arizona or a place like that, 15,000 votes. We've seen how close in those battleground states these things can be. Pennsylvania was like 44,000 last time. That's all it takes. Senator's right about that. It only takes just a few, not even in some of these states, not even a percentage point movement to a third party candidate. That's the first problem. The second problem is even if they succeed at getting 16% or something and somehow winning three or four states, all that's going to do is put it in the House of Representatives. I mean,
Right.
because no one gets to 270, and
Yeah. How do
the
you think that? I
House,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
Senator, you've been
and
with those. You've
it,
been with those fine Americans. I mean, how do you think that's going
yeah.
to
I
Well,
play
mean,
out?
that's not going to work.
no, I mean, people don't really fully understand how it goes. They would think that the whole House of Representative votes on it, but that's not the way it happens. Each
Right.
state gets one vote, and you just do the math. They're not going to vote for an independent. They're controlled by either Republicans or Democrats,
Right.
and more states are controlled by Republicans right now. So it goes to Donald Trump. Don't think for a second that there are enough Liz Cheneys and folks like that and Adam Kinzingers in the United States Congress to say we're going to vote for the one who got the most votes or whatever. They're going to vote for their team. They're going to vote for their team. So under 2 out of 3 scenarios, just about, it goes to Donald Trump if he's the nominee.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about it, the
But
whole premise of an independent campaign is that the Democratic and Republican Party are corrupt, broken. Then you're going to go into a situation where you're dependent upon the
well,
Democratic and Republican Party to vote for you. Like, that's going to work. I mean, that's,
well,
you
no, and
know,
that's the other fallacy in the whole thing is that the total buy-in that both sides are equally messed up,
I find that
extreme, is just. I
it's
mean,
so
that just
wrong.
alone is so disingenuous about what they're about, and by the way, they always stress that people don't want either of these two candidates, especially Joe Biden. I mean, they single him out in their public statements. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really
but
it's the
and
one thing
Joe,
they are transparent about. I think is that this is really an
right?
effort to weaken Joe Biden.
And that claim about people especially don't want Joe Biden is really gone down the toilet this past week when
Yeah,
Joe Biden raised $70 million in the last quarter, more than any other, more than all the Republican candidates combined. And the most fascinating part of his financial raise for the Biden Harris ticket was 30% of his donors were new donors, not ones from the
I
last
didn't
campaign.
realize that.
yeah.
They were
That's an
new
incredible,
new
that's
donors.
an incredible stat.
Yeah, that's
And
just
an
that.
average 400,000 people, average contribution of $35. I
Yeah,
mean, I'd just love to, since no labels won't tell us who their donors are, could they at least tell us what their average contribution is? Is it 3 million? Is it 5 million? But what's their average contribution? Because we know Joe Biden's is $35 from
right.
400,000 people.
Well, look, let's kind of wrap this up.
Well,
What do you think, Senator, the best thing that people watching this can do um, to try to save the country next year, try to discourage no labels from doing this crazy stunt? What advice do you give to just how can people contribute?
Well, first of all, I think people can, lift up this administration and all of the amazing
Amen.
that Joe
yeah.
Biden
Yeah.
and this administration has done, whether it is the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, 13 million jobs, an economy that is defying all expectations. And at a time when he could have panicked and done something different to try to control inflation or do whatever, he was a
Yep.
steady as you go. This man knows how to govern, guys. He knows how
Yeah.
to govern. And I think the most that you can do is lift up him as the president he is. And that is somebody who reaches across the aisle, who reaches within his own party to bring the left and the center left together to try to get things done. That's the number one thing. And the other thing is to not just buy into the BS that you're hearing about choice and not buy into the thing and challenge when anybody says, I really don't like Biden. Lift him up, but to say, look, the alternative is going to destroy democracy. We know that. And that's not going to be just Trump. I mean, there were several of those other Republicans that will do the same thing, maybe even quicker if they get
Yeah.
elected. But I think you've got to challenge the premise that we have no choices, because we do. We've got some
Mhm.
great choices out there right now. You've got to challenge the premise and you've got to ask, and there's got to be some pressure put on no labels to disclose who is behind this, what motives. People always believe that somebody has a motive when they're putting big money into politics. And
Yep.
and generally that's true. So
Mhm.
what disclose their donors? How are you going to select the nominees? What do you mean you're going to just do it behind closed doors? I think you got to challenge every premise that No Labels is running under. That's what we've been doing, I think, publicly with you guys. You got to challenge every premise and not let up on it. But the main thing, and I go back to this, Joe Biden has not. People ask me all the time about why is his message not getting out there, and it's because he's been the president and he's been governing. He's not been
Mhm.
candidate Joe Biden, And I think as we move into this campaign and you're going to see him as a candidate, we need to lift that up and talk about it more and more. And I think hopefully these will take care of itself.
You know,
Joe,
there was a
yeah, I know you feel that way. Yeah.
there was a slogan that I recall from early 1980s, but I'm sorry, but I think it applies here. It was he doesn't make a lot of noise; he just gets things done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh, and that's you know, do you and it actually goes right across against Trump perfectly because a guy who
Right.
made a hell of a lot of noise and got almost nothing done. But you know, before we cut this off, Doug, I did want to get a quick take from you on the target letter that the Trump. I mean, it's a former prosecutor, U.S.
Yeah.
attorney. Just you know, your insight into.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think anybody. I don't know about my personally. I don't think it's going to impact any of his voters or anything. You know, so that's not what I'm talking about. But sort of, how does this? What's this mean now going forward? How do you
Yeah.
see it?
We've seen this play out before. We saw it play out recently in the Mar-a-Lago. We see it play out. This is a standard thing where a prosecutor is coming to the end of the line. And they are basically going to give his lawyers an opportunity to come in and explain why he shouldn't be charged. I think it would be very surprising if we don't see an indictment. Um, Coming down. What we really don't know is if there are other target letters that have been out there that have given to some of these people that have either testified or given information. But clearly, this is going to happen. And I don't think I've heard a lot about what's called a superseding indictment down in Florida. I don't. January 6th happened in Washington D.C. It would be a separate charge in my view. You're not going to combine those with what happened in Florida. But guys, I want to mention one other thing real quick because it's something to really keep an eye on, I think, in terms of this bigger picture. And that's what happened in Michigan today when they charged the slate of fake electors
Right.
with felony charges. Donald Trump is not charged in that. And we've often forgotten that when we're talking about the 2020 election, it's really 50 elections. Under our electoral college system, there's 50 elections. Those guys were trying to steal the election in Michigan. That's what they're charged with doing. We've got similar charges in Georgia. There may be similar charges coming out of Arizona. So we may see a lot of other indictments of those that were trying to benefit Donald Trump in which he was not even involved. I think that that's very possible. We're seeing it in Michigan. So be watching the other things to show. And the reason that that's so important is that I'm hoping that that is what the American people need to see. Because in 2024, I am more concerned about legal stealing with new laws and people in charge that are going to do things that allow fake electors to come forward and do those things. People need to really, really pay attention and wake up and be on guard for 2024.
Yeah. Not to do a little self-advertising here, but I have a book coming out in October called "The Conspiracy to uh, Steal America," and it that people miss the point that you just made when they say if we don't hold those responsible for January 6th, it's just practice for a coup. But the real point is they're trying to make a coup unnecessary.
Right.
Right.
If you pass a law in Georgia that the state legislature can overturn the popular vote, when they do it, it'll be perfectly legal.
Yep.
And whenever you see democracy slide into autocracy, one of the key elements is a new legal structure to justify it. And there is a vast world out there that is attempting to do that. Um, it's just, they're out there now. They don't make a lot of noise, but they're incredibly well funded. The same people that are behind the Federalist Society.
Yep.
They got that $1.6 billion donation that went to Leonard Leo, largest in history. So, I think they look at that Supreme Court ruling on something like independent legislative theory and, okay, 6-3, but they think, well, we got 3 votes.
Yep.
That's a good start,
Yeah.
and they're very patient.
Two of those votes they may have purchased.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah, this idea that the standard is it's not legal is now
Yeah.
illegal has now become kind of the Clarence Thomas defense. You think about that, I mean,
Yeah. But this
all
this
right.
does go to that article that the senator referenced at the beginning in the New York Times. People should
Yep.
go check that out
Yeah.
because it really
Don't
is.
read it. Don't read it late at night. You won't sleep.
Yeah,
You
it's
know, it,
scary. The reporting
it,
there was
it is. And that is
dreadful.
one of the things that a frequent guest in Lincoln Project and Resolute Square, Ruth Ben Ghiat, a historian who writes about autocracies, who wrote a brilliant book called Strongman. And one of her key points is they always tell you what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
and believe them. Don't
Right.
dismiss it.
yeah.
Right.
All right. So, look, everybody watching this should go out and buy Bending Toward History, the senator's book. It really is
It's a great book.
just a wonderful, unusual book that is a combination of memoir and detective story, um, the triumph of faith over pessimism and hope over darkness. I found it very, very moving.
Thanks.
So get that and listen to the Trippy Show podcast. Um, and keep going to Resolute Square. We're trying to be a pro-democracy platform. A lot of the bad guys are out there, and we don't mess around on this. We think we're right and they're wrong, and we think that one of the problems of current journalism is this idea that objectivity is the greatest good. When how do you tell both sides of a lie? And that's not us. We are definitely partisans for democracy, and we're out there fighting every day with your help. So with that, let me just thank everybody. And Senator, you got to promise to come back. Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Doug.
and if nothing else, we'll talk a little Alabama women's football. All right. Thank you, guys.
Sounds
Join us
good.
again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Thanks. Take care.